I want to talk with you briefly about the new Cradle of Filth album, Cryptoriana, The Seductiveness of Decay, simply because this is a band that you don't need to say much about. If you are a heavy metal fan, there's a good chance you know who they are and kind of what their modus operandi is. The fact that they have a tremendous gothic exterior and interior with their compositions that is bled over by the fantastic lyricism of Danny Filth, and then his unique presentation of all that. That the music has just a lot of a real distinct property to it that certainly counts them among some, one of the uniquer products that heavy metal does dispel. This is a band that has gone through some changes, don't get me wrong, from their very first days. However, this is an album that has shed some of the skin of their 2000s and early 2010s experiments, and has kind of gone back to those roots that you got from an album such as Dusk and Her Embrace, which they just decided to do some work with, retool, remix, re-release a couple of years ago. And that was a great prompting point, I think, for this. And it's a good way to sense maybe a return to that style, or maybe this is just a one-album sidebar. But it's a really nice thing to listen to. It feels like having that old Cradle back, because some of the stuff from their newer era was not really my swing cup of tea, but still contained some pretty decent material. But right whenever you listen to Heartbreak and Seance and Achingly Beautiful, you harken back to some of those old school epics. And I think about songs from The Cradle to Enslave, or Dusk and Her Embrace, or even Midian, going all the way back to those earliest tomes to really craft some fantastic, dark-sounding heavy metal that feels like Danny Filth is 20 years younger, and feels like the sound itself is 20 years younger, and this is still a band that is itching to get all of that attention, or itching to, really be known within the heavy metal community instead of only being sort of a niche thing. Now that they are bigger, they almost want to exhibit that for the world, although I'm sure their fan base has fervently and respectably gone back to the 1990s albums to understand what it's all about. These two tracks really just hit you square in the face, and that's the cool part about this album. It's uncompromising. It is one that just continues along that fashion throughout the entirety of this disc, with songs such as Vengeful Spirit really feeling like a true a true highlight point, but then getting into Death and the Maiden, which is nearly 9 minutes in length. You can just stand back and say that Cradle of Filth certainly has taken some of their past ideas really to heart and have returned like a blossoming blood flower. I'm not even sure if that even works there, but why not? We're going to roll with it. I just love how Danny's voice sounds so absolutely youthful on this song, and not to mention on this entire record. And I love the fact that the compositions, while they are really driven by elements that we have heard before from the band, it gives it a bit of freshness. After going back and revisiting some of their elder work, isn't it just apt that we get an album that sounds very much like it would fit in that era of the band? And that is exactly what we have with this disc. Like I said, I just want to talk about it briefly to you folks. I don't want to examine it in too much detail for you guys. I feel like this is an album you need to explore for yourself, especially those of you Cradle fans that perhaps have not been as thrilled with some of their later material from the late 2000s, early 2010s. I think this is going to be an album that's going to be more in your ballpark and more of your cup of tea. If I were to give this a ranking, I would give it a 22 out of 30. I think it's an album that needs to be consumed by metal fans, especially those that have maybe written off Cradle of Filth just a little bit. I like this return to form, and also the Alice in Hell cover is pretty darn cool as well. That's an old Annihilator song for those of you who don't know. If you don't know who Annihilator is, scope them out as well. Awesome Canadian band. But yeah, definitely scope out this album from Cradle of Filth. Really, really good, solid work. I'll talk to you guys next time.